So, good morning, good evening. So, today is our last day on this text, but next Thursday we'll start at the same time doing Shanti Deva's, it's translated sometimes Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or Engaging in the Bodhisattva's Conduct. Okay, Bodhicharya Avatara. So that'll be once a week on Thursday morning here, but same time in Europe and Russia and Israel and Britain. Okay? So today, let's start with the visualizations and recitations. There's a few questions to go through, and I want to tell you a story from somebody who applied the teachings, what happened, and then we'll get into the teachings for today. So remember to visualize the three jewels in the space in front of you, and yourself surrounded by all sentient beings, and especially put the people that you have difficulty with in the space in front of you, knowing that the Buddhas cherish this being or these beings that we find so difficult, that the Buddhas cherish them just as much as they cherish us, and as much as they cherish all living beings. And so to loosen our grasping them as being some sort of solidly evil, disgusting people. But remember, they're just a body and mind under the influence of karma and afflictions, and they always won't be who they are in this particular life. At this very moment, all the infinite or countless sentient beings in the universe, each one of them is having their own individual experience. Some feel happy, some feel miserable, some feel neutral, but all are under the influence of ignorance and or its latencies. So as long as we have ignorance and the latencies of ignorance in our mind stream, there's no completely peaceful state. But as soon as we can eliminate these, then it's possible to attain the non-abiding nirvana of a Buddha. Non-abiding in that it doesn't abide in the extreme of samsara or in the extreme of liberation for our own sake alone. And when we think of what sentient beings, ourselves included, go through because of ignorance, then think, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were all free of this ignorance, free of the karmic seeds of the actions created under its influence? And so let's aspire for that, for ourselves and others equally. And with the motivation of benevolence and kindness and compassion, let's work towards full awakening. So first, the story. One of the people who is listening to this whole series of teachings, he's been a Dharma student for many years. I can't even remember how many years ago it was that he started coming to classes. But he's an activist and was working in law for environmental law. Okay, and so he wrote that just after the teaching the other day, when I was talking about, dealing with people who don't measure up to how you want them to be, people we don't like or are critical of. He said he got news of, one judge had given a verdict in one case about preserving land for an endangered species. And the judge said it was, they don't need to preserve that land for this endangered species. So he was very disappointed by the verdict. And he said, normally he would have been quite angry at the judge, but he said he instantly thought of the teaching about that. He didn't specify which aspect of it. Oh, well, he did. And he said he instantly thought, well, this judge is under the influence of afflictions and karma too, just like me. So what do we expect? And so he didn't get angry. Yeah? So this is what Dharma practice is. Yeah? When you're able to take something that you've heard and apply it to your own mind in your own life so that your attitude changes, and your mind changes. That's what real Dharma practice is about. So I felt very happy after hearing that. It's like, oh, good, somebody listened. Somebody's practicing. This is great. Yeah. Okay, so we can still make prayers for all the endangered species and for their lands to be protected. Okay, then there's a couple of other questions here. So one, somebody's saying, what are some of the characteristics of affectionate love? Is it a feeling in the heart? I am still confused about the differences between affectionate love and love from a Buddhist perspective. Okay, so affectionate love comes before either love or compassion when we're generating these things in sequence, because it's a 7-point cause and effect instruction, which means that each step is an effect of the previous step, which is, part of its cause. So heartwarming love or affectionate love must come before love and compassion. Heartwarming love comes from seeing the kindness of others. And because of seeing the kindness of others, it sees them, one way it's described, it sees them as in beauty. It sees them as lovable. It sees them as living beings as worthwhile. Okay? So that kind of attitude. Yeah. So it's a positive attitude. It's not attachment, because attachment, the person personally and you're glued onto them and you always want them near. It's not that. Yeah. But it's an open, caring, and affectionate feeling towards living beings who have been kind to you in the past. And it naturally wants to reciprocate that kindness. Okay? So that's heartwarming love. Then love is the wish for, any sentient being, or hopefully all sentient beings, if we're practicing well, to have happiness in its causes. And compassion is the wish for them to be free of dukkha, or suffering, and its causes. And between love and compassion, there's no specific order. Some people generate love first and then compassion, others compassion and then love. But heartwarming love comes before both of those. Okay? Because we have to see sentient beings as kind in order to want them to have happiness in its causes and be free of suffering in its causes. If we don't see them as kind, as worthy of our affection, as worthwhile, then we're not going to pay any attention to them or wish them well. Okay, so that's how we go about doing that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in order to do that, then we have to have equanimity, and we have to get rid of this bias, the attachment for people who are dear to us, aversion for people who threaten us or get in our way, and apathy towards everybody else. Okay? And so that's a really important one to level the playing field. Because as long as we're holding grudges against people, and as long as we're holding resentment, against specific people, it's going to be really difficult to wish them well, isn't it? Yeah. And you hear people saying this, it's Christmas. May everybody be happy, but so-and-so, may they get hit by a truck. Yeah. Or they think that, and they may not say it out loud. But enough people these days, boy, people are just spurting their anger out at anybody who's in front of them nowadays. But, that kind of mind, so judgmental, so fixed, so full of a grudge, it harms the person who has it more than it even harms the person it's directed towards. Okay, so, our society is very polarized nowadays. When we see people who are angry like that, instead of getting angry, back at them, like we see banners now from people who are protesting the instructions from their governors to shelter at home. And people are angry. And I saw one sign that said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And as somebody said, well, he may have death, from the coronavirus. And, you deserve that. Or like the story you told the other day of two people who were saying that the virus was a hoax, and then they both got the virus and they both died from it. And the amount of, how do you say it, vitriolic speech that was directed towards them on social media, by people they didn't even know, oh, you got what you deserve, good, yeah, with their family, of course, because the person was dead, they couldn't hear it, but the family got it. The person who has that kind of attitude is actually in a state of a lot of suffering. Yeah. So don't be intimidated by people's anger. People are angry because they're actually feeling powerless, because they're feeling miserable. And so recognize that in yourself when you get angry at other people, it's because actually you're unhappy. Yeah, and the anger gives you a sense of power, but it's totally false. And it doesn't help you at all. And then karmically, it's very damaging. So, it really behooves us to spend time meditating on the kindness of others so that we can counteract that judgmental mind that, wants to destroy our enemy. Because that mind, it's the cause of future lives' happiness. It causes us present lives' unhappiness as well. So it's not a show of power at all. Looks like a show of power, There was one picture on the internet of, the cops standing there, because the governor had just affirmed we're continuing the order, and the cops are standing there in front of the Capitol, and somebody's standing like this far from a cop. In the picture, the guy was like, with his mouth open and ferocious eyes. Yeah, probably. And the cop just was staying there. But, usually you would look at somebody who's that angry and think, boy, that person they're really, saying it the way it is. They're exercising their power, But actually, they're just miserable and unhappy and feeling powerless, actually. So let's see that not just in ourselves, but not just in others, but in ourselves, and remedy that kind of mind. Okay, then the next question is from somebody in Ukraine. And I must say, I'm really happy. We've gotten a few questions from people from Ukraine, and I'm really happy that you're listening to the teachings. Yeah. I was in Ukraine in I think it was 86, maybe? No, 96 or 95 or sometime around there, early, mid-90s. And I have very strong memories of that experience. I was able to teach the Dharma there. And also my ancestors, or two of my ancestors are from Ukraine. So, the question from Ukraine, and this actually is a question that people come up with in the States too. So the question is, if we can come up with another word instead of compassion to express the wish for others to be free of dukkha and its causes. Why? Because the word compassion is very difficult to promote amongst non-Buddhists because of the etymological meaning of compassion, which means suffering with or suffering together. And she says in some languages, such as Russian, the term for compassion is literally written as suffering together. And educators, because they're trying to use His Holiness's teachings about emotional education in schools in Ukraine, and educators are reluctant to use, this term of suffering together in a class about emotional education, because it implies that, when you have compassion, you suffer with somebody, you suffer together with them, and so they're miserable and you're miserable, and that's supposed to be a virtuous state of mind, which it isn't, of course. And so she said some people are using the term educator or empathy, but empathy also, it doesn't have the same meaning as compassion. So they were suggesting the word responsiveness. So to me, responsiveness in English means you respond to different things, But I looked it up in the dictionary, and it is a synonym for compassion, Yeah. Yeah, some of you are having the same reaction I did. You didn't know that it also meant compassion. Yeah, I didn't either. But another word for another synonym of compassion was kind-heartedness. And I like that one. You know, if you have a kind heart towards somebody, you wish them to be free of suffering. So I would say whatever word works best in your own particular language, you know, if responsiveness works, use that. If kind-heartedness works, use that. Yeah. But whatever word we use, because the meaning of the word ningche, yeah, in Tibetan, or karuna in Sanskrit, it has such a specific meaning. No matter what English or Russian or French word we use, we've got to describe the meaning and define it and talk a lot about what this mental state is, because the word does not convey it. Okay? And I must say that I myself have been on a few panels with people talking about compassion, and they very happily explain the etymology as suffering together and suffering with. And each time I hear somebody explain this as the meaning of compassion, I cringe. Yeah, because that's not the, the Buddhist meaning of compassion. Although, I mean, and here's where it needs some teasing apart. Because when we hear suffering with or suffering together, we think that person's suffering, so I suffered too. Okay? So that is totally different from the Buddhist meaning. Having that happen is called personal distress. Yeah. Why? Because the focus has shifted to us. I'm suffering. Okay. And compassion, the focus is on the other person or persons. They're suffering. Okay. But in another way, you can see, suffering with could mean that you're aware of somebody else's dukkha, yeah, and you are with them in wanting to be free of it. Okay, so maybe in that way it could be, but most people take it as in the first way, which is not the Buddhist meaning at all. Yeah. So it's so embarrassing in panels. Somebody who comes before me describes this is what compassion is. I think Russell even did it in the book. And then I come along and I have to say, well, with all due respect, it actually means like this. Okay. So perhaps responsiveness, and if you're going to, especially if the term is literally translated as suffering together, then responsiveness or kind-heartedness would definitely be better. So, as with all the other graspings that we've been talking about during this series, I haven't finished explaining the third one, and I haven't finished explaining the second or the first one either. Okay, so I'm hoping that this series is just like a little, the tip of the iceberg, that will, spark you to learn more and to investigate these topics more. But we'll go on to the last one because today is the last day, so we better touch on it at least. So the fourth one is, let's see, I have different translations here. Okay, we'll use this translation. So the fourth one is being grasping onto inherently existent things and their characteristics. Okay, so grasping people and phenomena as existing inherently. And the antidote is to reflect on phenomena as selfless, like dreams or illusions. If you conceive true existence or inherent existence, you cannot attain omniscience. Therefore, as an antidote to grasping onto inherently existent things and characteristics, you must reflect on all phenomena as selfless. Moreover, all phenomena have a nature of not being established even as anything inherently. Okay, when the conception of true or inherent existence occurs, that is the view of a self. Yeah, whereas being fixated or grasping onto phenomena as empty of existence is the view of nihilism. So that's talking about the two extremes, either seeing things as inherently existent or totally non-existent. So recognize all phenomena to be like dreams. Okay? Because a dream appears to exist really, but that's a false appearance. But the dream still exists. The things in the dream do not exist the way they appear, but the fact that you had a dream exists. Okay, so it's similar to a reflection in a mirror. The face you see in the mirror, there's no face in the mirror, but the reflection of the face exists. Okay? And same thing with people on a screen. There's no people on the screen or in the TV or in the computer, but that appearance exists. Okay? So it's not everything about the things and people we encounter. Yeah, they're not inherently existent, but they're not non-existent either. So by inherently existent, what we mean is things that can exist without depending on any other factors. Okay, things that have their own nature within them that is independent of anything else in the whole wide world. Okay? So it would be things having an independent nature because they don't depend on causes. Yeah? Things are just there. They don't depend on causes. Or they don't depend on parts. Or they don't depend on a mind that conceives and labels them. Or they don't exist in relationship to other things, okay? But things having their own essence. The difficulty with this is that when we think we and everything around us has its own inherent essence, then, especially with reference to the self, yeah, our happiness and our pain also exist in a very solid way. There's a real me, and my happiness and my unhappiness. Okay? Everything gets very concretized. And as a result, we develop attachment, we develop anger, jealousy, arrogance, all of the 84,000 afflictions. And we then create karma. We do actions motivated by them. And as a result of that, then we take rebirth again and again in samsara. Okay? So the root is this ignorance that grasps inherent existence. Okay? So I thought today, because some of you have probably, I don't know everybody in the audience. I can't even see you. I'm just kind of guessing. But I know a few of the people who are in the audience. And you've heard the explanation of the 4-point analysis before. So I thought to just talk about emptiness in a slightly different way today than the 4-point analysis. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is read you just a few parts from a book that does not yet have its full title. Yeah, it's going to be volume 7 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. And I'm kind of playing with the title Delving into Reality or Delving into Emptiness or something like that. But that's not sure. So you get a sneak preview, okay, of the manuscript. Don't tell the publisher. Actually, it's okay because I'm not reading that much. But His Holiness explains something so beautifully that I want to read it because it's far better than I can explain it. Okay. So we were just talking about the two extremes because what we're trying to get to is what's called the middle way view. So one extreme is nihilism. Things don't exist at all. The other extreme is absolutism. Things inherently exist. Okay. The middle way view is not here's one, here's the other, and middle way is a combination of both, but a compromise in between. Not like that. The middle way view is completely distinct from either nihilism or absolutism. Yeah, it's not the two of them cut in half. It's distinct from both of them. But these two extremes are things to be avoided in order to realize the middle way view. When we have a view of nihilism, what is often happening is we are confusing the emptiness of inherent existence with total non-existence. And with the view of absolutism, we're confusing existence with inherent existence. Okay, that's often what is going on. So the mechanism behind this is right now we're grasping at inherent existence. Ourself, everything around us, has its own nature. It exists from its own side, under its own power, independent of everything else. And the feeling that we have about it, it's hard to recognize because we've had this since beginningless lifetimes. So it's not like we once realized emptiness and then developed ignorance. So all we have to do is remember what emptiness felt like and go back to it. No, this is beginningless time. Our minds have been obscured by ignorance. We've never seen the ultimate reality clearly. So, things to appear to us in the way they appear. Doesn't everything around you appear very real? Yeah, it's all out there. There's real people out there. Yeah, there's real objects out there. There's things that have really delicious taste. There's things that are really inherently valuable. Everything we relate to as if it had its own nature. Yeah. Sometimes we don't grasp it so strongly as having its own nature, even though it appears that way. But other times we really grasp it strongly. And that strong grasping is what produces the afflictions and then the karma that causes rebirth. Okay, so you can see in yourself, this is just an example, okay, the difference in your feeling about I, the capital I, between when you're just sitting here and you say, I'm sitting here. Okay, I'm sitting here. Contrast that feeling of I'm sitting here with I am sitting here. Okay? Is the way you see the I different in those two? Same word? I'm sitting here and I am sitting here. I am sitting here. Me. You must realize this is me sitting here. And this is my seat. And I don't want to give it up to you. Because there's a real me and my happiness depends on this seat. Okay. So the rest is not said verbally, but it's certainly implied when we say, I am sitting here, you know. So there, the feeling of I is it's a strong I, isn't it? Yeah, it's an I that really, it's there, and it looks like it doesn't depend on anyone or anything. Yeah. When you have that feeling of I, do you think, oh, I exist because the causes of me exist? Do you ever even think I exist because the causes of me exist? Yeah? Do you ever even think that? No, I am just here. You know, I am, God's gift to the world, even though I don't believe in God. I am here. I am an ultimate reality that coincidentally happens to be the center of the universe, who always thinks the right things, who always must win arguments, who always must be comfortable. Okay, so there's a big difference when there's active grasping at the I, as in that situation, between that and when the I is appearing truly or inherently existent, but we're not actively grasping it. And that's the I of I'm sitting here. What's next? Big deal. Let's go on. Okay. So it's also the difference between my thermos and my thermos. Okay? How the owner, appears to exist. Yeah. My thermos, yeah, it's appearing truly existent, but we're not grasping. My thermos, that I is really concrete because we're grasping at, we're assenting to the appearance of true existence and grasping that. Okay? So every time in your life when you feel this big I or big mine, say to yourself, that's ignorance. And do I want to act out of ignorance? Okay. So what we confuse when we fall to either the extreme of nihilism or absolutism is just plain existence, meaning that things exist when we are not analyzing them to find out what their ultimate nature is. They exist just on the appearance level. We confuse just that conventional existence with inherent existence because we've always seen the two completely mixed up together. And we've never even thought of inherent existence as something other than existence. Yeah. If things exist, they inherently exist. They have their own nature. They're out there. I'm in here. I have my own nature. You're out there. You have your own nature. That's the way things have appeared to us, that we just accept that. So we confuse just regular conventional existence, what exists, what appears when we're not analyzing, and inherent existence, independent existence. So we confuse those two on one hand, and on the other, emptiness of inherent existence. In other words, the absence, the lack of inherent existence. What we're trying to understand or realize when we do the meditation on the 4-point analysis, for example. That emptiness, we confuse that with total non-existence. Total non-existence is there's no elephant in this room. I don't think. There was an octopus. Yeah, we had a little pink octopus. It's hiding somewhere. But there's no elephant in the room. Yeah, so we confuse total non-existence with emptiness. And so we think that if things inherently exist, then they exist. And if things don't inherently exist, they totally are non-existent. They're like the elephant in the room, like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, like telling the truth, non-existence. So we can, that's how we get things, we're like either or. Either they exist inherently or they totally don't exist. Okay? So we have two groups of people. We have the nihilists and what's called the essentialists. The essentialists are the people who think everything has an inherently existent essence. Okay? So here's what His Holiness says. Both, he says, confusing existence with inherent existence. And confusing emptiness with total non-existence. Both the nihilists and the essentialists fall to the two extremes of absolutism and nihilism. So it's interesting. You would think that the essentialists and the nihilists would have totally different views. Actually, they both operate on the same set of assumptions, which is if it exists, it inherently exists, and if it is empty of inherent existence, it's totally non-existent. So both the essentialists and the nihilists believe those two things, okay? And so they fall to the two extremes of absolutism and nihilism. They think that if something is empty of inherent existence, it is totally non-existent. As a result of thinking like that, this is the nihilists, okay, they cannot establish cause and effect within emptiness and fall to the extreme of nihilism. Because, they're saying if something is empty, it's totally non-existent. So you just, refuted the inherent existence of cause and effect. You found cause and effect to be empty. So that means cause and effect don't exist at all. And so then the nihilists say, well, nothing exists. And that's where you have people nowadays too who misunderstand this, who say, well, there's no good and there's no bad. And ethical restraints don't matter at all. because there's no good and there's no bad. There's no virtue and there's no non-virtue. Samsara and nirvana are exactly the same. So you hear people say that, yeah, but they don't understand the meaning. Okay? People saying samsara and nirvana are the same doesn't mean they're exactly the same. If they were exactly the same, why should we have to practice the path and try and get out of samsara? Because we would already be in nirvana. And if we're already in nirvana, why aren't we blissfully happy all the time? If samsara and nirvana are equal. Yeah, samsara and nirvana being equal means that they both lack inherent existence. It doesn't mean on the conventional level that they're the same. When you hear people say, oh, there's, for the high yogis, there's no good, there's no bad, they can do anything. Yeah, so these people take that kind of statement literally. What it means is, okay, that when you're a very highly realized practitioner, you see things as, you don't see things in the same way ordinary beings do. So your emotional response is not the same. Okay, so therefore you don't create the same virtue or non-virtue because you don't have afflictions arise in relationship to various objects. Okay, it doesn't mean there's no good and there's no bad, because Buddhism is completely based on ethical conduct on all levels of the practice. At the beginning, we have the pratimoksha precepts, those ethical restraints, including the 5 lay precepts, monastic precepts. Then we have the bodhisattva ethical restraints. Then we have the tantric ethical restraints. Somebody who practices highest class tantra adheres to all 3 sets of ethical restraints. Yeah. They don't say, oh, there's no good, there's no bad, so I don't need to keep any precepts at all. It doesn't matter. They don't think like that. They keep all 3 sets of precepts. Okay? So this is the kind of misunderstanding that we find, even in contemporary circles of people who assume they understand Buddhism. Yeah. This kind of, well, it's all the same because it's all empty, That's not it, okay? Things still function on the conventional level. Things are not totally non-existent. So actually, somebody who practices highest class Tantra, their ethical conduct is even stricter and purer than those of people who don't practice that. Okay, they pay much more attention to ethical conduct. Okay, so the nihilists, they can't establish cause and effect within emptiness because they say if things don't have inherent existence, they don't exist at all. So there's no cause and effect. So there's no need to take precepts or keep ethical restraints. Okay, so it's a really damaging wrong view. Yeah, because the view of nihilism can really lead people to create a ton of negative karma. Mm-hmm. Okay. So both nihilists and essentialists believe that if something exists, it must inherently exist. They cannot see cause and effect as like illusions because they do not understand that things appear inherently existent, although they are not. Instead, they believe that if things appear to inherently exist, they do inherently exist. Okay? But so the essentialists and the nihilists both believe that. The difference is the nihilists refute inherent existence and then go to the extreme of nothing exists. The essentialists hold on to inherent existence because they don't want to be nihilist, but as a result, they're holding on to the view of permanence or existence, the view of essence. They become essentialists. Okay? So do you see how these two groups of people, they have the same basic assumptions, but one says, yeah, you're right. Things are empty of inherent existence. Therefore, they don't exist. The other one says, no, we can't go to that extreme and say they don't exist. So they are inherently existent, or they do exist. They do exist. So they must inherently exist. So then they become essentialists grasping at inherent or true existence. Okay. People deal with this quandary in different ways. Nihilists deny the existence of dependently arisen veiled truths or conventional truths, whereas essentialists abandon the emptiness of inherent existence, assert something else as the ultimate truth, and fall to the extreme of absolutism. Okay. Until people relinquish the tenet systems that have such views, they will continue to confuse existence with inherent existence and emptiness with total non-existence. Okay? Most people go to the extreme of being essentialists. Things inherently exist because you need to have that view to assert any kind of ethical conduct. Okay? So most theistic religions are based on grasping at true existence. You know, there's a truly existent God who created truly existent beings. There's truly existent virtue. There's truly existent non-virtue, truly existent heaven, truly existent hell, and so on. Okay? On the other hand, we have people who are materialists, and they say, you know, the only thing that exists is what we can see with our senses. Okay? So we see inherently existent things, but that is false. We can refute them being inherently existent. So actually, they're totally non-existent. Instead, and those people say, instead of them saying that things are like illusions, in that they appear one way but exist another way, those people say they are illusions. So that would mean everybody else I'm seeing around me, none of you actually exist. Okay? None of you have any existence. You're completely the projection of my mind. Yeah. And if you don't exist, then my actions can't harm you. So if I steal from you, if I kill you, if I gossip behind your back, if I do other things that the essentialists think are harmful, actually, because you don't even exist, you're just projections of my mind, nobody else experiences any suffering. Yeah, so I'm not hurting anybody else. And cause and effect also don't exist. So even if I create what other people think are negative actions, they aren't negative actions because there's no cause and effect either. That doesn't exist. Okay, so you can see that that's really dangerous. Yeah. I mean, this is the nihilistic view. Remember Jim Jones, who in Central America had all of his followers swallow poison together? Yeah. So this is the kind of view of those groups. You know, oh, it doesn't matter, and there's no good, and there's no bad, and whatever. Yeah. So it's actually quite a dangerous view. Mm-hmm. Okay. So realizing dependent arising. So remember the first talk I said the Buddha's slogan is dependent arising? We're coming back to it now. Okay. So dependent arising counteracts the extreme of nihilism, and it counteracts the extreme of absolutism. Okay. So it counteracts the extreme of nihilism because with dependent arising, although things are empty of inherent existence, they still exist dependently. Inherent existence means independent existence. Independent existence and dependent existence are mutually exclusive. Something can't be both, and something can't be neither. So by asserting dependent arising, you're getting rid of inherent existence, because things that are inherently existent are not dependent. And you're also getting rid of inherent existence, because if things dependently arise, they can't be inherently existent. Getting rid of non-existence. No, okay. Dependent arising gets rid of the whole thing, okay? It gets rid of nihilism because although things are empty, they still arise dependently. Okay, so in that sense, it gets rid of non-existence. It also, gets rid of inherent existence because although things are not inherently existent, they do exist. How do they exist dependently? Okay, is that clarifying? Okay. So, realizing emptiness opposes the extreme of absolutism because being empty, things do not inherently exist. Phenomena, and this is the part that's more difficult, because this is the middle way. We just got rid of nihilism and essentialism, but the middle way, our mind kind of goes, ooh. Things exist only nominally. That is, by being merely designated by term and concept. So merely negates inherent existence. Things exist only nominally on the level of worldly conventions. By being designated by terms and concepts. Okay, so that's how things exist. When we hear that, does that feel a little bit uncomfortable? When somebody says, when you think to yourself, I only nominally exist dependent on term and concept, do you feel like you only nominally exist dependent on being designated? On some mind designating you? No, I am here. Don't you see? What are you talking about? Only nominally existent. Okay, so that's how strong we grasp at inherent existence. That's why when I said to you before, do you ever think of yourself as I exist only because the causes of me exist? I mean, we know intellectually that we're cause phenomena, don't we? Yeah. It is very apparent. Our body is caused from our parents, our mind caused by previous moment of mind. Everything about us is caused. But do we feel like we're caused phenomena? No, I am here, independent of causes and conditions. Okay? So you can see how it's very easy to know the words talking about emptiness, but to actually penetrate the meaning, and negate the inherent existence, it's not so easy. And you can see how, if we negate existence, what are you telling me? I'm not here? Well, if I don't inherently exist, then you're telling me I don't exist at all. That's what it feels like, isn't it? And we're not going to say I don't exist at all. So the remedy to that is then I must inherently exist. So what in the world are you people talking about? That I exist only nominally. Yeah. Okay, I can accept that there's some nominal existence. My parents gave me the name. I didn't, that name is only a name. Yes, I'm nominal in that way. But they gave that name to something that is a real entity. So the name, nominal. The real thing, that's me. Okay. Saying that functioning things is synonymous with what? Impermanent, or products. Okay, so saying that functioning things are unreal does not mean that they lack the ability to perform functions. This is the problem the Sautantrikas have, okay? Because they say, you're saying functioning things lack inherent existence, they're unreal, then they can't perform any functions. But we see them perform functions. Okay, so you're wrong. Things are real. Okay, so unreal means they lack inherent existence. They are unreal in the sense that a reflection of a face in the mirror is unreal. It appears to exist in one way, but exists in another. So the face appears to be a real face, but it's not. But that appearance of the face in the mirror exists. Okay, so this is when we're talking about illusion-like existence, this is what we're talking about. A reflection appears to be a real face, but is empty of a face. In spite of its being false, a reflection still functions. Yeah, a reflection functions. When we shave our head, we use a mirror. When you squeeze your pimples, you use a mirror. Okay? So, yeah, this is an example my teachers have used too. But it's a good example, isn't it? The reflection in the mirror functions. But the face in the mirror is false. Okay? So the appearance functions even though the appearance is false. That in spite of being false, a reflection still functions. By perceiving it, we wash our face. Similarly, although phenomena falsely appear as inherently existent, they arise from causes and conditions and perform their specific functions. Okay, so we're not saying that because functioning things are unreal or empty, that they are frozen and they can't function. In fact, quite the opposite is true. If things had an inherent essence, then they would be frozen, because things that don't depend on other things cannot change. Because change always involves being influenced by other things and by becoming something that wasn't there before. Okay? If things were inherently existent, they would be totally frozen. nothing would change at all. So it's because they're empty that then they function. Whereas people who, again, confuse existence with inherent existence and emptiness with non-existence, people who do that, they think that if things are empty, then they can't function at all. But it's actually the reverse. It's because they're empty that they function. Because emptiness is the lack of inherent existence, is the space within which things can arise depending on other factors. If you don't have that space that's empty of inherent existence, then there's no space for dependently arising things to be generated, to appear. Okay? So that's one little bit that I wanted to share with you that I think is quite valuable to understand. Yeah, that actually is very valuable. It comes up again and again. As you study emptiness, that what I just explained, again and again and again, that point comes up. Yeah.
So when we say being merely designated by term and concept, who is doing that designation? Because the object will be different based on the designator.
Exactly.
So which one is the real one?
That's the point. There isn't a real one. Because it's just like you said. Yeah, the object can appear differently and function differently to different beings with different karma. So there's the example of a cup of fluid. Yeah. So human beings say there's water. The gods say there's divine nectar. The pretas say there's pus and blood. Okay? So there's some basis, but it's being designated completely differently according to the beings who are doing designating it, because it's influenced by their sense faculties, by their karma, how those things appear. So when we're seeking the one right way that they exist, we're grasping onto inherent existence. Give me the one way they really exist. But you can see this, and excuse me if I give another bathroom example, but it's very pertinent here. Because this is when it really came home to me. Okay, there are certain times in your life, you hear a lot of teachings, and then there are certain times in your life where you have an experience and you go, oh, that's what the teaching means. Okay, so many years ago, I was living in Dharamsala, and there's a little Tibetan enclave between McLeod-Ganj and Tushita. And there's no indoor plumbing in that little Tibetan enclave. At least there wasn't years ago. This was probably, when was it? 80 something, the early or mid 80s. Okay, maybe they have plumbing now, but that time they didn't. So I was staying in one of those houses. Yeah. So every morning, everybody in that little enclave, we all had our own places in the forest where we went to do our business. Fine, okay? So you do your business, you come back. And you go back to the same place the next day, and your business from yesterday is not there. What happened to it? All the flies ate it. All the bugs ate it. So I went, oh, what appears to me as something foul and disgusting is their lunch. And it appears to them as delicious. Now, which one is it? Is it foul because I see it as foul? But if it were inherently foul, the flies wouldn't eat it. But if it were inherently delicious, I wouldn't eat it. Okay, so that's when this thing, the example that I had heard about the liquid, really like, oh, it really is true. We're not just making stuff up here. Yeah. That things can really function differently to different sentient beings. Mm-hmm.
Does this also mean like culturally you see things differently, then they function differently to you? For example, like in America, potato is a carbohydrate, but in India is a vegetable. Then you serve it differently.
Yeah. Well, a potato is the root of a plant, and a vegetable is usually the stalk or leaf of a plant. A carrot is a root. Yeah. Yeah. Do we consider, that's true, those are roots. Do we consider potatoes vegetables? Yeah. We call them root vegetables. Yeah. And they do have a lot, they have a lot of carbohydrates. But but regardless of what we call them, they each, have their own physical, makeup of them. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that carbohydrates and vegetables function differently. I wouldn't divide things that way. Yeah. So, but, okay, if you think of it, a lot of our education involves learning what to call something. Yeah. And a lot of our quarreling is what we designate things to, especially court cases. In the court case, there's a set of data, and people are arguing, do we call that data guilty or do we call that data innocent? Yeah. Is there an objective thing? Yeah. It's hard to say. There may be some cases where everybody agrees, but everybody agreeing on something doesn't necessarily make it true. It makes it function in society to a certain extent, but it doesn't necessarily make it true, because there's certain things that everybody believes that are complete hallucinations. Yeah. But there are some things, it's easier to look with something. Oh, a good example is a watch. Okay? In old Tibet, because we look at watches, how do watches function? Tell you what time it is. In old Tibet, they didn't know how to tell time. There wasn't that idea. So watches, when a few of them managed to find their way into Tibet, they were considered jewelry. Okay? So that people would wear their watches and kind of show it off as if you had, a very valuable piece of jewelry. Sometimes people still do that. A watch is a status symbol. But, it didn't function for them to tell time because they didn't have that idea. Once that, they were exposed to other things, then, they saw, oh, watches can tell time, and so you put it in a certain way, and then it functions that way. Okay. So, just by calling something by a different name, that doesn't necessarily change its function. Okay. Like if I need a doorstop, I might take a bottle and put it there and use it, to keep the door from moving back and forth. And that's my doorstop, okay? But I could also take the bottle and use it to put milk in, okay? So some things have multi-functions, and we may call them different names because they function differently. One person can be a mother and a daughter and a sister and an aunt all at the same time. So people can have many, be designated as many different things on that same basis of designation, but function differently in relationship to different things. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean that they change their function. Whereas some things, like the fluid, the function is quite different in the three cases.
Someone online is asking, how has this Buddhist worldview of dependent arising, the middle way, made it possible for you to experience a more peaceful and altruistic state of mind?
Oh, excellent question. First of all, it reminds me that things are only appearances to my mind. Yeah? They're appearances to my mind. They are not inherently existent, objective realities. So when I think things are appearances to my mind, then they aren't so solid. Yeah, they still function, but they're not so solid. Because there's nothing, that objectively existent thing existing out there. There's nothing out there. So when my mind doesn't make things so solid, I'm a lot more peaceful. Okay? Thinking about dependent arising helps me to realize that things arise because of causes. So when I'm in a difficult situation, then I say, why am I here? It's not because the world's unfair. It's not because of somebody else's fault. It's because I created the cause in terms of my own actions, probably in a previous life. Yeah. So, there are situations that I have no wish to be a part of. After 9/11, I had no wish to be part of a conflict between Al-Qaeda and the U.S. I had no wish to be part of that. And yet, there I was. I had no choice. Yeah. I have no wish to be part of this whole pandemic mess. Yeah, but I am. I'm part of it. Yeah. So, rather than get angry at somebody else for what the external environment is, to realize why am I in the middle of this, even though I don't want to, is I created the causes. So I created the causes, so chill out, children. Don't get angry. Don't blame other people. Don't say the whole world stinks. Don't say it's all hopeless. It's just a result of causes you created. That's all. And if you don't like these results, don't create the causes for them. Okay? So the view of dependent arising, really helps me to be much more peaceful in the face of adversity. Yeah. It's here simply because causes are here. Some are external causes, but why am I experiencing it? I created the cause for that.
Someone else says, so there is no truth, since it depends on who designates it or sees it. And there is the thing observed, the one who observes it, and the one or part who knows is observing. I'm confused.
Okay. There's no objective truth out there waiting for us to apprehend it. Okay. This is the way our culture has brought us up, that everything exists external to us. So there's one truth Yeah, one truth. And we solidify it. And then, of course, whatever we believe happens to be that one truth. And then we argue about what the truth is, okay? If, dependent arising is true, emptiness is true, yeah? We're not saying that anything can be anything, yeah? By saying that things exist by mere designation, it means that they exist in relationship to the mind, but it doesn't mean that anything can be anything. Yeah, if there's a jar of rat poison here, I can't drink it and say it's gonna be blissful wisdom nectar. And if there's bleach out there and I have the coronavirus, I cannot designate the bleach. If I designate it as medicine and drink it, it's not going to perform the function of medicine. Okay? So just saying that things exist by being merely designated doesn't mean that anything can be anything. Yeah, or that there's one unique, special, objectively existent being out there who has all the right labels for things. Yeah, it doesn't mean that either. What His Holiness says is there's two choices. Either things can exist inherently or they can exist nominally. There's no third choice. Yeah. They exist inherently or they exist dependently. We can refute inherent existence. So the only other option is they exist dependently. They exist nominally. Yeah. But don't look for the one person who has all the right labels to define everything. And don't think that just by changing the name of something, it can function differently. Please don't drink bleach, okay? I don't care what you call it. And this other medicine, what's it called? Hydrochlora? Okay, these medicines with long medical sounding names that only the pharmacists and medical health professionals can pronounce. Yeah, why don't they give them simple names? Why do they have to label things with like 5 syllables? Just give it a label with 1 or 2 syllables so the rest of us dummies can remember what it's called. Yeah, don't you think so? Yeah, I think so. And of course I'm right. Yeah. Okay, but just because I or somebody else says this medicine is going to cure you doesn't mean it's going to cure you. Okay. So it's not a question of calling, just changing the name and then we can say, oh, this is it. That's the classic manipulator mode. What do manipulators do? They change the names. Oh no, this isn't this. It's actually this. So it's okay. Yeah. So no, that's not the way it works. Okay. So it's not so easy to understand. But my experience in trying to understand all of this, which I do not fully or completely understand, is that conventional reality is messy. Yeah? Whenever you get language and terms and designation involved, things get messy. And we can see how difficult it is communicating sometimes. We have different meanings for words, like compassion. Yeah, one culture it means something good, and another culture people recoil. And also there are ways that we use words that are actually, the literal meaning is incorrect, but everybody says it and everybody understands. Okay? So, out in the garden, Venerable Nima planted, what did you plant? Spinach and carrots, beets, chard. Okay? So she planted carrots, beets, and chard. If you go out to that garden, do you see any carrots there? Or any beets there? Or any chard there? No. You see dirt. But we say she planted carrot, beets, and chard. And we all understand that she planted the seeds for them. So we're not all expecting to go out there and see them growing. Yeah, not yet. Yeah. But so you see, just the way we use language is very messy. Yeah, but everybody still understands it. So, when we talk about, conventionalities, and this is why they're called veiled truths, yeah? How they really exist is veiled. We can't see their emptiness. Things, they exist on the level of appearances. There's nothing objectively there that you can say, this is it. One more.
Asserting that different people have different perspectives allows for people to assert that global warming is not happening and that Trump is a good president. So how do we answer that?
Okay, this is the same answer as I gave before. Just because somebody thinks something or labels something doesn't mean that it functions that way. Okay? We have to use our wisdom. First, we have to have, like with global warming, if you have a clear set of criteria, what criteria indicates global warming? Then you test for those things and see if that criteria are being fulfilled. So because you've defined something already, and to be called this, not to be this, but to be called this, it depends on fulfilling these criteria. Yeah. Then you test the criteria. If the criteria fit the definition, then you can say, yes, there's global warming. If you don't have a clear definition of global warming, yeah, then you can't do that. If you don't want to believe in global warming, people can say whatever they do and do 15 backflips, and you're still not going to believe that there's global warming. Okay? And because how many times have we believed things and held on to our beliefs and realized that later that we were wrong? Okay, so it's not just a thing of you, it becomes that because you say that. And it doesn't mean that everything everybody says is true and that all opinions are equally valid. Yeah, it doesn't mean that if you think the bleach is going to cure you, it will cure you. Yeah, I mean, there's you test for scientific evidence and you see, well, it does clearly cure you because you die. So you no longer suffer from COVID-19. But do you want that kind of cure? No. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So this is why the middle way view is not easy to understand. Yeah, because we want nice, objective reality. And even if it's dependent, and even if it exists by mere imputation, we still want it to be imputedly objective or objectively imputed. Yeah. I mean, we are so full. Our ignorance blinds us so much that we don't even see our own contradictions. So, as I mentioned once in this series, if you're going to practice Buddhism, get used to being wrong. Yeah? And wrong doesn't mean bad. And wrong doesn't mean failure. Wrong means you keep investigating. So with that, yeah, remember dependent arising, especially in terms of karma. Remember how we are dependent on other living beings' kindness to us. Remember that things exist dependently, not objectively and inherently. Okay. So, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I couldn't be in Europe like I was supposed to be for these weeks, but I hope somehow people benefited from the teachings that we had here. And please continue to think about them. Yeah, think about them, investigate, read more. That's how your wisdom is going to grow. Don't just say, well, she said that, so I believe. Because if you think like that, then when somebody says something different, then you believe that. And then you believe what the third person says too. So really use wisdom and think about things.